Welcome to the tutorial for the Peacehaven top. I'm just going to start by showing you which needles and threads are suitable for jersey. Now this is a jersey needle and this one's a Microtex needle. This is my needle of choice, so that's the one that's in my machine currently, but those are fine, or a ballpoint needle is also fine. And this magic thread called Maraflex, and it's a Gutermann thread. And if you look, it's really stretchy, which is amazing. So you could use that on your sewing machine and just use an ordinary stitch, just a straight stitch, without having to use any sort of stretch stitches. Okay, so I've done some samples on my fabrics. I'm using 2 fabrics. And you can see I've got my stretch stitch there, my lightning stitch, I call it. And I've got a 4-thread overlocker, which I've just overlocked the seam to neaten it. Don't need to with jersey, it doesn't fray, but it does look so much neater, doesn't it? And that's going to be my under layer. So I've checked the stitch in both fabrics because they're different. One's a cotton, one's a poly. And these are other stretch stitches that are on my machine. That's a rather pretty sort of honeycomby one. It make a decorative hem perhaps. It all depends on what's on your machine, but you should have a basic stretch stitch. This is how I've done my hem. I've overlocked it and then I've used my stretch stitch, my lightning stitch for that. If you don't have a special stretch stitch, you can just use a zigzag. That will have the same effect. Okay, so that's covered my seams and finishes. Now this I'm also going to use, this is optional. It's a flexible kind of interfacing that I can put on my seams, a seam tape, and I'm going to put it around my neckline. You could do it around the armholes, but it really doesn't need it. It's got sleeves, but I'm going to be using that too. Okay, so I'm going to start with the base layer. This is the layer that touches the skin. And you can see I've got a back base and a front base. I've got my V-neck, and they're both to fold, various notches. You can see I've traced it with a coloured pen as well. Shorten and lengthen, sorry, lines in case you're longer or shorter in the body. Do hold the pattern up to you and see if you think it's an appropriate length before you cut. There's my tape. That's on the right side of this fabric. There we go, and a little bit on the back neck too. It's a stretch tape, as I said before. You could, if you've got some stretch jersey interfacing, you could cut little strips and use it as well. Not essential, but I just find if you're new to jersey, it helps stop it all rolling up and just makes it a bit more easy to handle. So I'm pinning at the shoulders. So this is front and back base layer, matching those notches. I've pinned one shoulder, now I'm going for the side seam. Start at the underarm and work your way down to the hem. That's one side. I'm going to pin the other shoulder. So this is right sides together, matching the notches, pinning from armhole downwards, and the shoulder seam you want to pin from the neckline out. There we go. So a centimetre seam allowance on all these seams. I'm starting with a little back tack, and I'm using my super stretch stitch, which is my lightning stitch, what I call it, a lightning stitch. So it does take a little bit longer because it sort of goes back on itself. So it takes a bit longer than doing an ordinary straight stitch, but if you've got that lovely Maraflex thread, you can just use an ordinary straight stitch and zoom through this. Alternatively, if you've got a 5-thread overlocker, you can just do it all in one go. You don't need to use the sewing machine at all. So there we go. I've sewn my centimetre seam allowances on the side seams and the shoulders. I'm going to use my 4-thread overlocker just to neaten those edges up. Okay, so now we're going to take the top layer. So we've got a Peacehaven back, again cut on the fold, and a front cut on the fold, and you can see it's got this very flattering flared hem. Mark on your notches And we're basically going to do what we did just now with the base layer. So lay right sides together. I've got this rather groovy vintage fabric, which is incredibly bright and cheerful. Thought it would show up nicely on the cameras though, so it's working quite well, I think. So you can see I haven't used the stabilising tape on this one. I don't think it needs it. It's not rolling and I don't want it to be too chunky around the neck. So matching side seams, matching notches, right sides together, pin from the underarm to the hem. I've pinned my shoulders as well. Here we go, another side seam. And like I say, it's just repeating basically what we've done with the base layer. So centimetre seam allowance, stitch from underarm to hem, from neckline to shoulder, 1 centimetre. There we go. I'm going to finish that off again with my overlocker. You could use a zigzag. There we go, nice and neat. Just give that a press to set the seams. Okay, so now this bit needs a little bit of concentration. So what we've got, you can see my base layer is inside out. So I've got the wrong side to the right side of the top layer. This was my thinking for using the two very different fabrics. So it's going to feel a bit weird, but this is how you need to bag out the neckline. So I'm going to nest these shoulder seams. I've pushed the top layer towards the back neck and the base layer towards the front. And I'm going to start by pinning those together. There you can see I've pushed one to one side and one to the other side, lining up the stitching where the seam is. Pop a pin in. Now, centre back I've marked with a little snip. You can see my tape there is facing me. And remember that's on the right side. And also what I'm going to show you is where that tape was made it really easy to mark my centimetre seam allowance for that V. This will just help when I come to stitch, so I know exactly where that centre front is. I won't get any wobbly or off centre V's on my V-necks. It's a big help, and obviously it makes it easier to see and it stabilises it a little bit more with that tape. I do have some of that tape for sale in my shop if you're interested in having a go. There we go, so we've pinned the rest of the neck. I'm going to start at the shoulder seam. I'm going to do a little back tack and I'm going to carefully work my way around to the V, and then I'm going to pivot and come all the way back round. So here we go. Again, I'm using that super stretch stitch, so it takes a little while as the fabric's fed backwards and forwards. So just make sure your raw edges are matching and carefully work your way around to that first point of the V. I'm getting there. Okay, now I'm reaching the bit where I've drawn my centimetre seam allowance on, so I'm going to stop where I think it is. Let's lift that foot up and have a look. No, I want to do just another stitch or two to get right into that point. Okay, that's better. So now I'm going to pivot under my machine with the needle down, moving my fabric, and off we go again. Okay, so there we go. I've stitched around my neckline. You can see I've managed to stitch absolutely on that V, so that'll be lovely and central, and I'm going to snip into that V, but I'm stopping a millimetre away from the stitching just because I don't want it to ladder or unravel at the V. And then I'm going to snip in every couple of centimetres all the way around, and I'm going to trim away these little bits of seam allowance here. You could trim half your seam allowance on your interfaced neckline, your base layer, but I'm not going to bother. It's not that bulky. Okay, so now we can turn it through once we've done all our snipping. Proper ray of sunshine this top. Here we go. So I've tucked the base layer inside the top layer, and I'm just going to have a little titivate of that neckline. There we go. So it just needs a gentle press. Roll that seam and get the seam on the edge as much as you can without the under layers showing on the top. Look, I'll just show you. You can see, look, the seams are all on the insides, so that's perfect. That's it. I've given it a little bit of steam. Now the next step is I'm just going to join my armholes, so both tops will be stitched together there. Start by pinning at the shoulders, and again I'm going to nest those seam allowances. So just lay your top flat and pop some pins around your armhole. Nest those underarm seams. The top layer I've pushed to the back and the under layer I've pushed forward again. So all this is to join these two fabrics together. So when you put your armhole, your sleeve in your armhole, it won't conflict. You won't have lots of different layers moving around. I'm just using a big ordinary straight stitch for this. I don't want to waste my thread doing a super stretch stitch when it's literally just to hold these two fabrics together until I've popped the sleeve in the armhole. Next job, we're going to stitch the sleeve seams. Here's my sleeve pattern. So you need one pair, 2 notches for the back, 1 notch for the front, and a little balance notch at the top, which matches the shoulder seam. So we've got one pair here. So we're going to fold them right sides together. Take one of these out to sew now. And just pin your seam from underarm to hem. Again, you'll have a centimetre seam allowance, stitching from the underarm to the hem. Back to your lightning stitch here, or your super stretch, and I'm going to give that an overlock. There we go, and I'm just going to give it a little gentle press to set the seam. Now we're going to insert the sleeves. So there's my top. Now here's one of my sleeves. You can see here, double notch denotes the back of the sleeve, so I know that's the right sleeve for the right armhole. Matching those underarm seams, pop a pin in. Okay, now you're just going to work your way around the armhole to the top. Rather large notch there at the top of the sleeve, which matches my shoulder seam, so pop a pin in there. Make sure you've got single notches where single notches need to be and double notches where double notches need to be, so you've got the correct sleeve in the correct armhole. This is where you're glad you've done your little stay stitch step, so you've only got 2 fabrics to match rather than 3 fiddly ones. So put as many or as few pins in as you need. You can always do a little hand tack if that helps you with this bit. And then I'm going to start sewing from the underarm, again centimetre seam allowance using that stretch stitch. I'm going to work my way all around my armhole. Taking my time to match my edges and my notches as I go. Okay, so let's have a look at that. That looks good. I'm going to overlock my edge there again. Fabulous. Always looks so neat, doesn't it, once it's all clean like that on the inside. Let's have a look, check on the outside. There's no puckers or tucks. Great, one perfect sleeve. So now we're going to do the hems. I'm going to do them all together and all the same way. So this top layer is overlocked, as are all the other hems. And I'm going to turn it up probably 1.5 centimetres. And I'm going to do this finish so it will look like that, just the single stitch. You could do the double, that makes it look like a store-bought t-shirt, but I'm just going to do the one. And the same on the cuffs. You could use one of these pretty ones on the cuffs maybe, but I don't think it'll show on this fabric. It's rather elaborate. So here we go. Turning my seam allowance up, and I'm using my stretch stitch again, so it will take some time to get around the hem. But steady as you go, work your way around the hem of the top and the base layer and those cuffs. Here we go. So it looks a little bit wobbly at the moment, but it's all stitched. Just needs a press. Oh, there we go. See, even with jersey, if you just give it a little press at various points, it looks so good. So you should now have a V-neck, double layer, long sleeved jersey top that looks a bit like this. Enjoy.